The Mafia and the Teamsters tough new government charges tonight. Gorbachev asking the party for massive changes in the Soviet way of life, and the U.S. Army and Korean prostitution rings.
NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. A major American scandal, an alliance between organized crime and the Teamsters Union, the nation's largest and most powerful labor organization. That's the language being used to describe a tough new federal lawsuit filed today in an effort to reclaim the Teamsters from the mob. As NBC's Mike Jensen reports now, this is a showdown between a tough prosecutor and a tough union.
In response,
the government suit was announced by U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani.
Organized crime has deprived union members of their rights through a pattern of racketeering that includes 20 murders, including at least 14 murders of dissidents, a number of shootings, bombings, beatings, a campaign of fear, bribes, extortion and theft, and misuse of union funds.
The suit names as defendants 26 alleged mafia members, among them the nation's top organized crime bosses: Anthony Fat Tony Salerno, Anthony Tony Ducks Corallo, and Carmine Jr. Persico. Also named as defendants, the 18 highest officials of the Teamsters.
All 18 board members have committed mail fraud, that 7 members have committed acts of racketeering that include embezzlement, receipt of illegal labor and benefit fund payoffs, and bribery, and that 12 board members have aided and abetted wire fraud in connection with the mafia scheme to ensure the elections of the last 2 Teamster presidents.
Teamster officials who flew into Montreal this week on union jets for their annual summer meeting denied any wrongdoing.
History will record that the complaint against the International Brotherhood of Teamsters marks the lowest point to which the Republican administration has yet fallen in the attack on working men and women of America.
But Ken Paff, who is a leader of the union's reform movement, welcomed the government's action.
What we want is very simple: a government supervised free election.
At a news conference in Washington, Attorney General Meese was asked about Teamster support of Ronald Reagan in the last 2 elections.
Had this evidence or had this information been available at the time, that President Reagan or then Governor Reagan would obviously not have accepted that kind of support.
Teamster President Jackie Presser, who supported President Reagan, is under indictment for racketeering and embezzlement. He has cancer and has given up day-to-day control of the Teamsters. Presser was defended today by Senator Orrin Hatch.
I have to say this, that Mr. Presser, regardless of what anybody else may think of him, has lived up to every promise that he made to me when I was chairman of the Labor and Human Resources Committee.
The AFL-CIO, which kicked the Teamsters out in the 1950s and recently took them back, blasted the suit.
The only level of corruption that I know about is what I read in the newspapers when they talk about the fact that the Teamsters are dominated by the underworld. Those are allegations. There's no proof in that.
At truck stops, Teamsters who supported their leaders stepped in front of the camera.
Because I got 4 more years and I can retire, and I'm satisfied the way things are as far as I'm concerned.
But most Teamsters who approved of the government suit did not want to be quoted. The government says it has no intention of keeping control of the Teamsters, that it wants to kick out organized crime, then have free and fair elections of new Teamster officers. Mike Jensen, NBC News, New York.
For all the troubles that it's had over the years, the Teamsters remain a formidable force. 1,700,000 members, truck drivers, waiters, clerks, warehousemen. 3 of its presidents have gone to jail, and all of them in recent years have been investigated extensively. Also coming up here tonight on NBC Nightly News, Gorbachev's call to action in the Soviet Union. Brian Ross with part 2 of his report on how American GIs are being used by Korean gangsters to get Korean women into this country to work as prostitutes. And Robert Lipside tonight on the fight that follows the title fight. Mike Tyson takes on his old management team over money.
I've been writing a lot of stories about aspirin lately, but if you think you've heard all there is about aspirin, think again. Clinical tests on headaches show there's a better aspirin formula. It's Anacin. Listen, the tests show that compared to regular strength aspirin, Anacin provides a more effective level of headache relief. Better relief. The latest good news about aspirin is Anacin.
Anacin, a better aspirin formula.
Mikhail Gorbachev has been promising winds of change for the Soviet Union, but his speech today to the opening session of the Soviet Communist Party conference was far more sweeping, radical really, than many experts anticipated. As NBC's Sandy Gilmore reports tonight, if the General Secretary has his way, there will be a wholesale transformation of the Soviet society.
Gorbachev spent 3.5 hours presenting his most radical and sweeping reform plans yet to 5,000 party conference delegates who theoretically have the power to turn him down. He complained about his conservative opposition.
In some cases, indeed, we are running into undisguised attempts at perverting the essence of the reform.
Gorbachev unveiled a proposal for a new permanent legislature with real power, to be headed by a president with real power, someone elected by secret ballot, someone who could be recalled from office.
That would be a new step forward in the democratization of the highest structures of government.
Under Gorbachev's plan, the party would have a powerful advisory role, but would no longer directly run the government and the economy. He proposed that more families be free to lease farmland from collectives to provide incentives to end chronic food shortages. These were radical proposals, but lest anyone think he'd gone too far, Gorbachev said, "Democracy is incompatible with permissiveness." That drew lots of applause, and within a few hours and a few blocks from the Kremlin, demonstrators, Crimean Tatars wanting to return to their old homeland, were learning the limits. They may not have heard Gorbachev's remarks about people who, quote, think that in this way problems can be resolved from redrawing boundaries to setting up opposition parties. But for many, if not most of these Communist Party delegates, the Gorbachev line is welcome.
I'll support Mr. Gorbachev. It is a dynamical and clever leader. We dreamed of such leader many years.
His speech to the first party conference in decades makes it clear that Gorbachev wants a firm break with the past. Whether he gets it depends upon how the mostly secret debate goes over the next few days. Sandy Gilmore, NBC News, Moscow.
And in France, many more bodies were pulled from the wreckage at a Paris train station today. The death toll from the crash of 2 commuter trains now is 59. As NBC's Jim Bitterman reports tonight, investigators have many questions, but few answers.
It took 20 hours for firemen to remove all the bodies from the train wreck. It was the worst railroad accident in Paris history. And now investigators want to know why the inbound train went out of control and why it was switched onto a track where another commuter train was waiting to leave. The trouble apparently began when a passenger on the train headed for Paris pulled an emergency brake lever. After the unintended stop, the engineer either did not or could not reset the brakes properly. A half mile from the station, he realized they weren't working and shouted a warning to his passengers. Then he and they raced backwards from the front of the train to relative safety. But those in the waiting commuter had only a few seconds warning that the runaway train was bearing down on them. 1 or 2 were able to leap to safety before the inbound train, traveling at more than 45 miles an hour, plowed through the entire first car of the parked commuter. The French have great confidence in their transportation systems. Sunday's crash of an Airbus jet and last night's train accident in rapid succession have not shaken it. Nonetheless, authorities here are being pressed for thorough explanations. Jim Bitterman, NBC News, Paris.
And a terrorist car bomb in Athens today killed U.S. Navy Captain William Nordine, the American military attaché in Greece. The car with the bomb was parked 300 feet from Nordine's home. As he left to go to work, the bomb was detonated, destroying his armor-plated car. No group claimed responsibility, but there has been harsh anti-American rhetoric in Greece recently. The U.S. called the killing a senseless act of brutality. And in this country, there's a new date for the next flight of the Space Shuttle Discovery, September 4th. That would be one day before Labor Day. The launch had been set for August 22nd after 2 delays from its original date last February. Discovery would, of course, be the first shuttle mission since the Challenger disaster in January 1986.
We are a nation of business. And to bring us together, there is the airline of business. Throughout the U.S. and 13 foreign lands, the airline trusted by business travelers for a half-century and more. United Airlines, rededicated to giving you the service you deserve. Come fly the friendly skies.
Any comments on the fight?
Yeah, it proves who the real champion is.
Was it ever close?
It was over before it started.
Think there'll be a rematch?
You think they want one?
How about a shot of the two champs together?
Diet Pepsi's won the title. In head-to-head taste tests, Diet Pepsi challenged and decisively beat Diet Coke.
Mike, how do you feel about sharing your title, huh?
No problem. Just not sharing my Diet Pepsi.
Diet Pepsi, the undisputed champion.
You've got this all wrong. You want to make news of the cereal today, you need a gimmick. Putting a whole banana inside a little bran biscuit, stuff like that. These are just flakes. I don't think I've tasted anything like it. Simple, light, it's really very good. Well, how about that? A cereal that doesn't need a gimmick.
Kellogg's Corn Flakes.
Corn Flakes?
Taste them again for the first time.
On this program last night, NBC's Brian Ross reported on a growing slave trade in this country involving prostitutes from South Korea working here under the control of Korean gangsters. But there is even more to this story. As Ross reports tonight, there is evidence that those gangsters get their supply of prostitutes with the unwitting help of American GIs, and the U.S. Army does little to stop that.
For tens of thousands of Koreans, this building in downtown Seoul is the gateway to a new life. This is the American Embassy. And by 8 o'clock in the morning, at a side gate to the embassy, there are long lines of Koreans, many trying for a fourth or a fifth time to get a visa to emigrate to the United States. The one sure way to get to the head of the line and become an American citizen is to become the wife of an American GI, one of the thousands of GIs serving in Korea. And there are many GIs and Korean women who fall in love and get married. But American authorities say there is also something else going on in these streets and in these storefront offices around the embassy, something that is now creating a huge problem in the United States. Brokers with alleged ties to Korean organized crime, setting up hundreds of marriages a year between GIs and Korean prostitutes. These are some of the Korean prostitutes who have married GIs, got American citizenship, and then quick divorces, and are now showing up in the prostitute arrest records of police departments all over the United States. Law enforcement authorities say that almost half of the Korean women who come to this country as the wives of American GIs end up working as prostitutes in places such as this strip of bars and houses of prostitution in Houston.
The Army has to know.
Terry O'Rourke, a county attorney in Houston, says even though almost every Korean prostitute they arrest has come to this country as the wife of an American GI, the Army hasn't done anything to try to stop it.
The United States Army is making my streets that I'm responsible for unsafe. So I've got a problem with the United States Army, yes, sir.
This is the headquarters of the 2nd Infantry Division of the United States Army, Camp Casey, 9 miles from the demilitarized zone and North Korea. And law enforcement authorities and State Department sources say it is because of what is going on around here and at other military bases in Korea, with the full knowledge of the American military, that the big-time prostitution rackets are flourishing in the United States. And what is going on around here is that at night, on payday weekends, men who have been in the field all week head for the sex clubs, where thousands of Korean prostitutes are at work, often just a block or two from the U.S. bases. None of this has been put off limits by the Army, and 3 different times, Army MPs tried to stop us from filming.
Sir, you need to cut that off right now, please.
MPs patrol these streets, but American authorities say they are actually run by Korean gangsters, and it is here where GIs get involved with the Korean prostitutes they marry by the hundreds and bring back to the United States, where a lot of the women go right back into prostitution.
Some of us are real suckers.
You're right on that one. You know, usually the guys that can't get married in the States to a pretty girl, they come over here and marry one of these. Just going back to the States. That's all they want to do is go back to the States.
These confidential military and State Department documents obtained by NBC News clearly show that American officials have known for years what's going on. One military document says, quote, "The Korean-born girl and the gullible young service member are the pawns in this lucrative scheme." Another cable says, quote, "We know organized crime is involved in a significant fashion. Can narcotics or national security issues be far behind?" But American officials here say top Army commanders in the last few years have resisted efforts to investigate or to crack down on the wide-open prostitution. Major General Jack Ferris, who commanded the 2nd Infantry Division until this month, says he can't do much about all the prostitution near his camp.
I don't like it, but I'm not troubled by it.
You're not troubled? Why not?
Well, I just don't like it, but it doesn't bother me an awful lot because it's there and there's not an awful lot I can do about it.
This is the scene night after night around U.S. Army bases in Korea. Wide open prostitution. The American military seems to be in no rush to put any of this off limits or to try to stop all the GI prostitute marriages. And more, what is happening in the back streets and back alleys of Korea, the prostitution, the gangsters, the rackets, is coming to cities all across the United States. Brian Ross, NBC News, in South Korea.
Splish splash, I was taking a bath, long about a Saturday night. Gloved up, got a clog in my tub, so I jumped down and fixed it up right. Just poured in liquid Drano, soon the clog was all gone. If they call it liquid Drano, baby, know it's real strong. Yipe sipes and it won't hurt your pipes. Metal pipe or plastic, liquid Drano's just fantastic. Now I'm splishing and a splashing.
Liquid Drano, the liquid strong enough to be called Drano.
Up to $2,000 cash back from Subaru is worth more than the same money from anyone else. It's worth more because Subaru builds a rugged, reliable wagon that's the best-selling import wagon in America. It's worth more because Subaru's XT6 has the same engine design found in a Ferrari or a Porsche. It's worth more because the Subaru Justy is the lowest-priced four-wheel drive passenger car in America. Up to $2,000 cash back on a Subaru is worth more because it's on a Subaru.
11 noisy 4-year-olds, an absent assistant, and Susan Macy is left with a headache that's going from bad to worse. That's why her next move is to Metaprin. Metaprin has the same medicine as Motrin, and nothing's proven faster for relief of headache pain or any kind of pain. It's also gentler to your stomach than aspirin. Metaprin works fast when you haven't got time for the pain.
Are you getting more than you want out of your high-fiber cereal? Like sodium and added sugar? If what you want out of your high-fiber cereal is high fiber, you should be eating Fiber One. You get more fiber with Fiber One, and Fiber One is low in sodium and has absolutely no added sugar. So get more of the fiber your body needs, and less of the stuff it doesn't. Get Fiber One.
There is some good news to report tonight about the drought. A storm system brought rain today to parts of the northern plains, and some forecasts are now saying that even more rain is on its way. As NBC's Roger O'Neill reports, the news sent grain prices tumbling.
The buying frenzy on the Chicago Board of Trade evaporated today. For the first time in more than a year, prices for soybeans and corn dropped, the maximum permitted in a single day. Wheat prices also took a dive. The sell-off was prompted by a new 10-day weather forecast of rain and cooler temperatures from the market's private weather advisors. For 6 months, a persistent ridge of high pressure has been pushing part of the jet stream way north into Canada, taking the rain with it and starving the crops in the Midwest and South of moisture. Today, private weather forecasters noticed a change in the northern jet stream. It has begun to move south and now flows across the U.S.-Canadian border.
For the first time in weeks, we do see evidence that this strong ridge of high pressure, which has been so dominant over the midsection of the country, causing extreme heat and dryness, is at least temporarily breaking down.
The predicted forecast of rain in the important Corn Belt states of Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana, if true, couldn't come at a better time. The corn is not yet developed and needs rain desperately. Farmers want the rain, but say they'll believe it when they see it.
We got to get the rain. Just because the weather boys are talking about rain, it don't help us.
While there have been scattered showers in the past week and some rain fell in Minnesota and Texas today, what's really needed is soaking rains. Maybe now there's a chance of it. Roger O'Neill, NBC News, Denver.
John Chancellor is with us now, and he's been watching that party conference in Moscow, as we all have, and it reminds him of some things American style. John?
Well, it does indeed, Tom. The party conference in Moscow makes me think of the Central Committee. Not the Communist Party Central Committee, but the Central Committee of the Democratic Party of Cook County, the Chicago Democratic Machine. Richard J. Daley was its last boss. Why do I think of the Chicago Machine? Because there's some similarity. In its heyday, the Chicago Machine had everything locked up, and if you were with the machine, you had job security, good housing, protection for your relatives, and cash that never had to be accounted for. Paradise, until Franklin Roosevelt became president. The machine's political power then went to Washington. Washington controlled jobs in the Depression, GI loans after the war, welfare. The machine had nothing else to give away, and it finally died. Those old aldermen hated Roosevelt, the reformer. Okay, those middle-aged party hacks from all over the Soviet Union at that conference in Moscow, today they have everything locked up. Power, job security, good apartments, decent food, better schools for their kids. So the country doesn't work, who cares? But now, they're saying, here's this creep Gorbachev trying to take it all away with his fancy intellectuals, with his pushy wife. This show-off reformer is, would you believe it, actually trying to make a deal with the masses, taking power from the party. We don't know how many of those party hacks are delegates to the Moscow conference, but if Gorbachev fails, they will have done it to him. Which is commentary for this evening. I'm off to cover some American politics, Tom, and I'll see you next week.
Okay, John, but speaking of that, by the way, on the campaign trail today, Democrat Michael Dukakis endorsed new housing programs that would cost $3 billion, and Republican George Bush called for a federal law banning discrimination against AIDS victims. He said that it is needed to lay to rest some fears that exist in this country. And it's a girl for Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg and her husband Edwin, the couple's first child and the first grandchild of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. The baby girl was born in New York on Saturday. She has been given the name Rose Kennedy Schlossberg in honor of her 97-year-old great-grandmother.
Honey, should we take the other car?
I'd rather not. Ford Escort now offers an attractive new design, plus fuel injection and a 660 powertrain warranty. In fact, the redesigned Ford Escort may make your other car seem considerably less attractive.
Honey, aren't we ever going to take the other car?
Nope. The world's best-selling car just keeps looking better all the time.
Now get a $500 cash bonus on 88.5 Ford Escorts.
You ever see food for lunch like this?
Seafood lunch at Red Lobster.
Ever see food? It's such a tasty price.
Most lunch is under $4.99.
Ever see food cooked up so quick and nice?
Served in 15 minutes guaranteed or it's free.
Ever see food for lunch?
From our shrimp salad sandwich to today's fresh catch.
Like the seafood at Red Lobster. We know how you love seafood.
Try our new lunch sampler, just $4.95.
I'm Jane Pauley. Tomorrow morning on Today, we'll look at a new method for treating AIDS.
And I'm Bob Costas, also Lakers coach Pat Riley and Elton John.
Tomorrow morning on Today.
61, 62, 63.
Independent laboratory testing proves that Sargent's new fast-acting flea and tick collars kill 3.5 times more fleas in the first 6 hours than the other leading collar.
I can't keep up.
And Sargent's new fast-acting collar keeps on killing fleas faster for a full 5 months.
Enough already.
So counters who count Sargent's fleas must work 3.5 times faster than counters for the competition.
4.
Sargent's new fast-acting collar.
I hope you're happy. I'm exhausted.
When Mike Tyson destroyed Michael Spinks last night, the immediate question was, who can stand up to this guy in the ring? But before he gets to his next boxing opponent, Tyson faces another challenge familiar to heavyweight champions: how to be sure that when the punch is gone, the money remains. As NBC's Robert Lipsyte reports tonight, Tyson is involved in a messy financial tangle involving old friends and a new family.
Mike Tyson needed only 91 seconds last night to claim his title as the baddest man on the planet. But the opening round of his latest heavyweight battle will be much longer: the lawsuit against his manager. That's Bill Cayton, who with the late Jimmy Jacobs financed Tyson's career. Jacobs' widow, Lorraine.
I'm very disappointed. We love Mike. We've known him since he was 13. And Jim and Bill have treated him as they would a son.
Tyson claims that Cayton and Jacobs never told him that Jacobs had a terminal illness when Mike signed a new contract in which Cayton would become sole manager upon Jacobs' death. The relationship between Tyson and Cayton began to unravel recently when Tyson's wife, the actress Robin Givens, demanded an accounting of her new husband's worth.
History has said that athletes get ripped off. I just don't want it to happen to Michael.
Joe Louis, who 50 years ago this month beat Max Schmeling in the so-called fight of the century, died broke. And Muhammad Ali, once the most exciting sports figure of his time, has lost most of his money. Tyson, who's not quite 22, has already made millions, and so have those around him. Still, Cayton and others have called Robin Givens a greedy wife.
If Michael wants to stop fighting after this fight or after the 5th fight from now, I want him to be able to do so.
I wasn't really appreciative of what you guys, quote, the reporters, did to me. Building up to this fight, you tried to embarrass me, you tried to embarrass my family, you tried to disgrace us. And as far as I know, this might be my last fight.
Early retirement. Now that would be the upset in the sorry fiscal history of the heavyweights. Robert Lipsyte, NBC News, New York.
That's nightly news for this Tuesday night. I'm Tom Brokaw. I'll see you tomorrow night.
Tonight, it'll be curtains when Matlock cracks a killer of an unusual type.
He looks like Tom Cruise with curly hair.
A Matlock mystery. Then,
How about a little revenge?
an old enemy in a new episode threatens to bring down the empire of J.J. Starbuck. And on Summer Showcase, rape may not be a crime if the victim is a boy. Of Macho and Men tonight.
Coming up next on The Scene at 6, it's decision night for the Metro Council as it decides how much more we should pay in property taxes. We'll go to the courthouse where council members are talking taxes right now. We'll see how the people and animals of Crofton, Kentucky are still being affected by last week's train derailment. Fire officials say this could be an especially dangerous 4th of July due to hazardous combinations. And we'll meet a cookie lover who turned his dream into a booming business.
These stories and more news coming up next on The Scene at 6.